One of the things that I've been working on recently, really trying to nail down my ability to do it, is glazing. I've done glazing before, but I'm starting to realize that for the longest time, the glazing I had been doing, the reason I was not happy with the results is just several small factors that needed adjustment. Now you can see on this Space Marine, if you're wondering, this is one of the Mark VI Horus Heresy Space Marines, and I'm doing it in Salamander colors. That's the shoulder pauldron I painted for it. Turned out okay, and he's going to have the big rooster crest on the top, so that's kind of cool. But I've been doing glazing, and what I did was I painted this in, Flesh from Citadel, and then I began glazing in, Warpstone Glow, which is the Salamander's colors, but I didn't want it to be that bright saturated Warpstone Glow all over. I wanted it to be a little desaturated. And if you're familiar with the Warhammer, if you're not, it doesn't matter, but there's another faction in Warhammer called the Dark Angels, and they have a very dark green armor. And so when you're painting salamanders, you have to be careful not to go too dark with it, or it's going to look like a Dark Angel. So I wanted there to be some lightness that would identify it as a salamander, that and the big giant flaming shoulder pauldron. But I started glazing, instead of just painting I keep forgetting the name. Let me just set it out here so I can see it. Instead of painting everything Warpstone Glow, I started glazing it so that there was more color down here, more on the front of the leg, more on the upper part of the chest, that kind of thing. If you're hearing some music in the background that sounds like an ice cream truck, that's our washing machine. It's just telling me that it's done. Anyway, I started glazing it on there, and now what I'm doing is I'm taking some Nocturne Green, and also from Citadel, and I'm kind of reversing it. I'm going into the shadow areas. I want to deepen the shadows to make the volumes a little more pronounced, to make more contrast between the light areas and the dark areas. I think it just gives it a better look. But what I wanted to do was just do a little glazing and show you what I've learned. Now, if you already are comfortable with glazing, I'm probably not going to tell you anything you don't already know. But if you've not tried it, or if you have and you haven't really had some success with it, then maybe some of the things that I'll show you here will be helpful. Now, as with anything that we do in our modeling, experimentation goes a long way, because you've probably seen that some paints behave differently, some brands behave differently, some colors within brands behave differently. So that's something that I've really realized, okay, I need to factor that in. I have found in general, now it's not 100% rule, but I've found that in general, Citadel paints, I find, handle thinning with water for glazing purposes much better than Vallejo. Vallejo seems to prefer glazing medium. Go figure. But I like just using water simply because it's cheap and available. And I've got plenty of Citadel paints. But let me show you how I prepare for glazing. You see, I've just got that little bit of paint there on my brush, like that. And then I'm going to get my handy bottle of water, and this is just tap water, and I'm going to put in 4 drops here. So that's a lot of water to a very little bit of paint. And one of the things that I have found out in my glazing was that part of the problem that I had to cut there and get this piece of paper towel because I'm fixing to use it. Part of the problem I had is that I was not thinning it down enough, and it was making the color jumps way too drastic. And you can see, do the old Juan Hidalgo thing and show you that the glaze there that I've got is just very, very minimal in terms of color. I really had to put some there on my thumbnail. Before, I would not have thinned it down that much, and that was causing me problems. So what I've started doing is using this using this much thinner than I would have before. And I'm also offloading a lot more than I would have before. And then when I go in and glaze, I'm having to, before the glazing layers I would have done would have required, 3 or 4 layers. This is requiring 10 and 12 layers, but it works much better. I've been much happier with how it's worked because it allows me to control it much better. It allows for much better blends. It allows for much smoother transitions between colors. Quite often on something like this, because I want that to be in shadow because his leg there is going to be in shadow. And so what I can do is I can get in like the main area glazed in, and then I can start adding additional glazing layers outside of that to help blend that transition. That's another change in the way I do this that has helped, is that instead of trying to glaze everything and get it perfect within a few blends, what I've started doing is saying, okay, let me get the dark area dark and then work on the transition between the dark area and the light area. Because with it this thin, you can go much further back, go much further into the lighter area, and then smooth out that transition between the two. And it takes, you see, I'm barely making a dent in this, but I've had to learn patience with this. I'm not good when it comes to patience. I'm very bad at it. And so, but I've had to learn that I just have to have more patience. Another thing that I've kind of learned in this is it's normal to go back and forth between the light and the dark layers sometimes. Sometimes you have to get that lighter layer and do some transition adjustment along there also. So it's a back and forth process. So that has really transformed my glazing, and I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I'm certainly not where I want to be with it, but I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I feel like I'm actually able to start doing on plastic what I envision in my head that I would like it to appear as. Back here on the back, it may be too subtle to really see, but the transition from Warpstone Glow to the darker color down here really helps bring out that volume. And it's real subtle, but that's exactly what I wanted. Now you can see I've got to work on this transition here because I got it a little too severe. So I've got to glaze that out to blend it just a little more. I added a little bit here at the top of the back of his boot so that will appear more in shadow. But making those just very small adjustments in my application method has really helped my glazing, and I feel like I said, I feel like I'm much more in control of it. A lot of this shoulder pauldron, while it's fairly rough, I looked at some work that Darren Latham had did. He is a Games Workshop painter and designer. I'd kind of followed a guide he did. Mine does not look as good as his, trust me. But I was really happy with the outcome on this, enough that I said, okay, I learned a lot from doing it the first time. I could paint over it and redo it, but I thought, I'm going to leave it like it is. I'm okay with it. So that's worked really good. And then just as more glazing practice, I've been working on this orc. I don't even know if I won't even put this one in a video. This is just something I'm kind of doing on the side. But I'm really happy with the way that skin is turning out. That's all glazing. Just starting with a very dark. I put down a base layer, then I just slop shade all over it, and then I begin glazing up from there. And I'm really happy with how the color transitions are going and things like that. So if glazing is not something you've done, it's a skill I highly recommend working on, because it's not just for painting minis. I mean, I know that I use it here, but you know, there were so many things that I think about now that if I would have had this, if I would have developed this skill when I was doing, say, aircraft modeling, it would have transformed the way my cockpits look. I now understand that a lot of what I saw very advanced aircraft modelers like Daniels and Marbiday and things like that, when they would, you know, do certain techniques, I realized they were basically doing a lot of what I see happening with minis. They were glazing, they were edge highlighting, they were doing all sorts of stuff like that. So I realize now that there's a whole world of things that I missed out on because I was so focused on the traditional way that an aircraft modeler would do things, that I didn't look into, well, how are other people doing this and how can I apply those techniques? So yeah, if you've not tried glazing, try it. And you know, you may hit the formula for you that just bam, you're just doing it and it's just working. It's taken me a long time. It usually takes me a long time to learn anything. I have to do it over and over and over and over again, on camera and off camera, before I really start getting it. But I feel like I'm in much better control of what I'm doing, and what I see in my head, I'm able to start applying on the plastic.